Welcome to Thomistic Womanhood. In today's video, we are going to talk about how to find the man of your dreams, or just one that you really like. Welcome to Thomistic Womanhood. Happy Thomistic Tuesday, or whenever you're watching this. So recently I posted a video about what do women bring to the table, meaning what do women bring to a relationship. And somebody posted a comment, you know who you are, asking about how would women handle the issue of finding someone they like. So in the video I used the example of, let's say you're young, you're in your 20s, you're feminine, you're pretty, you know how to cook and clean. So you have everything going for you and you have a lot of men that are interested in you, but how do you find somebody that you like? And how do you make sure that you make a choice that you're happy with? So that is what this video is going to be about. There are a lot of videos when it comes to the topic of like how to find the man of your dreams or how to find someone you like. People do talk a lot about like literally how to find them, like where to go. So we're not really going to talk too much about that. I'll say a little bit about it briefly, but I want to bring up kind of a few points to consider that are kind of help flesh out your strategy, so to speak, because it is a strategy. You do need to have somewhat of a strategy. So yeah, and I've got about 6 points, so I'll try to go through them quickly and I'll try not to ramble and make this long. I'll try to be concise. But anyways, first off, the first thing I want to cover is that we have to do a disclaimer. Whenever we talk about finding someone you like, then we have to talk about how mysterious attraction is, It's always going to be mysterious. We don't fully understand what attracts us to someone. I can rattle off a list of things and, I'm going to say in this video what I think drives the attraction. But at the end of the day, we don't really know, and we never really fully will know. So, just know that it's not a process you can completely control. So, second thing, what we do know, or at least in my opinion, what I think we know, is that it's about contrast, and specifically contrast in the gender roles. You need someone manly and you need someone girly. And they need to be, the manliness and the girliness needs to be sufficiently developed to where it's noticeable to the other person. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the girl being girly and the guy being manly. We see this in same-sex couples. We see this in, where it's flip-flopped. Maybe you'll get a very gentle, artistic guy and he gets with this very driven, goal-oriented woman. In any kind of like sexual romantic relationship, there has to be a masculine person who has that masculine energy, and then a more feminine person who has the more feminine energy. And when the two people involved, when there's that polarity, that contrast, then a relationship, takes place. And it's literally like the glue that kind of holds us together. And I think that's part of why it is so difficult for us to find people we're attracted to nowadays, is because we have such an androgynized society that we've really played down the differences. And now that spark just isn't there, So again, contrast, again, it's a mysterious process, but contrast is kind of what's driving it. So having said that though, in order to, let's say you're a woman and you want to find, the guy of your dreams, and what do you want to think about first? The first thing is mindset. You do have to take this seriously. I made a video previously called Take Your Relationship Seriously, and that's what I'm talking about here. You cannot float through life and just expect to have somebody amazing just drop into your lap. Maybe that happened back in the day, when society was more pro-marriage, then, you could do that. You could go to college and end up finding someone, or you could go to work and end up finding someone. And it would just kind of happen without you really trying. And while there are many women that does happen for, and many of you watching this, maybe that will work out that way for you. However, I wouldn't count on that. Serendipity is not as powerful a factor as it is because, as I mentioned earlier, we have such a force in society that is just really trying to keep everybody single, I don't want to sound all like conspiracy theorist, but we have a society that really doesn't care whether you get married. You know, people are constantly, as soon as you get a new boyfriend, you know, I'm sure you're always going to have that aunt or that friend that wants to point out to you, well, he might cheat, or, you know, you better be careful. Divorces are, you know, for guys, I think guys hear this especially a lot with like the MGTOW stuff. Like, oh, well, you know, she'll divorce you and take all your money, you know. There's always a horror story, you know. We have gotten so far off from valuing marriage and valuing like morality and the things that lead to happy marriages that naturally there's a lot of unhappy marriages. And, you know, we always hear horror stories. So the first thing is you really got to get your mindset in place, and you have to decide for yourself, I'm getting married, this is going to happen for me. You don't want to kind of talk yourself out of it. I think that's another thing. It's good to be married. You know, like I said, there's a lot of horror stories people are quite happy to tell you. A lot of times the people who are involved in those horror stories contributed to their own mess, you know, and they don't want to admit it. It's often the case, you know, it takes two to tango. But again, ultimately, marriage is a good thing. You know, God wants you to get married. In the Garden of Eden, when he created Adam and Eve, that is literally one of the first things he set up for human beings. You know, obviously he made light, then he made animals, then he made man, all that. But, you know, as soon as Adam and Eve were on earth, boom, he was like, okay, be fruitful and multiply. So marriage is a good thing. God didn't waste any time setting that up. So don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like you don't deserve it. You know, get your mindset right. You know, just be like, this is a good thing. I deserve to be married. You know, marriage is a good thing. And also have confidence in yourself. You know, I will make a good choice. You know, because I think especially with us women, people can get very protective of us, you know, our authority, you know, our parents or our teachers, things like that. I think people can be very overprotective sometimes, and they can kind of react as if like, oh, you're not going to make a good choice. Here, let me, you know. So have confidence in yourself. Be like, I will make a good choice, and I'm going to get married. I'm going to find the right guy. I will make a good choice. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you're going to have to weed through a lot of men. You know, especially if you're young and you're pretty, you know, you're going to have a lot of men that are lining up, and, you know, you can't blame them. You know, a woman has a lot of benefit to a man, and, you know, a lot of guys, they would love to have that benefit, but they aren't necessarily worthy of it. There's a lot of men that are quite happy to waste your time. You know, they're not sure they want to be married, but yet they're sure they want all the attention of women, you know. So yeah, you're gonna have to screen them. You know, are they emotionally healthy? Do they have vices? You know, are they into porn? Are they addicted to drugs or alcohol? You know, you're gonna have to weed through a lot of men. And the thing is you have to be a little selfish about it. Have you ever looked at those women who've been married like 2 or 3 times? You know, it's like, how do they do that? You know, you're like, I can't even get married once, and these women are out here on their 3rd wedding, you know? It's because these women are very ruthless about weeding through men. They don't put up with any crap, you know? If they discover that a guy's not, you know, going to be worth their time, boom, they're on to the next one. I think a lot of us women, we tend to feel sorry for men. We tend to be patient. We give them too many chances. We spend too much time in, you know, kind of dead-end relationships. And if you want to get married and you want to find someone you like, you're going to have to cycle through a lot of men. When you're like online dating or when you're dating in real life, you know, go on dates, ask questions, and think about, again, finding a partner is an act of self-interest. You know, obviously you have to think about what's best for the other person. I'm not saying be selfish, but at the end of the day, you know, you want to find a man who's going to make your life better, who will be a good spouse, who will be a good father for your children. And, you know, if the idea of it being about self-interest is maybe too much of a turnoff for you, then, you know, and you don't want to necessarily do it for yourself, do it for your future kids. You know, find a good guy that you will be proud of when your children grow up and they get old enough to have an opinion on their parents' marriage, because we all come to that point. We grow up, we look at the person our parents married, you know, we look at the woman our dad married, or we look at the man our mom married, And, once we become adults, we have opinions on that, And so you want to marry somebody that you can be proud of when your children grow up. You don't want them to ask you, like, why him, mom? You don't want that. So if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your kids, Think of that. But again, another thing, pick guys who already want to get married. That's going to save you so much time. And as a woman, we don't really have time. We have a finite window of youth and a finite window of fertility. So, we don't want to waste time. Guys can waste time, whatever, but we don't want to waste time. So you want to pick from among the pool of men that already want to be married. So when you're on a date with a guy, obviously you don't want to ask him like, so do you want to marry me? Like, that's not, a good question. But you do want to kind of suss out whether this is somebody who's serious about getting married, and preferably soon. If a guy tells you like, oh yeah, I want to get married, but not for 3 years. Okay, then that's somebody who may very well waste 3 years of your youth, and he may change his mind at the end of that, You never know. So you want to, when you're on dates with these guys, a good question to ask is, how important is it to you that your next relationship end in marriage? It's a nice open-ended question, You're not necessarily asking, do you want to marry me? But you want to find out in general, has this guy on his own independently decided he wants to be married? Has he identified that marriage is a goal he wants to pursue, or it's something that's going to have benefit to his life? Because unless a guy, this is the thing that I think is different between men and women. Men get married not when they meet the love of their life. They get married when they're ready to get married, and they find a woman they love. There's a subtle difference there. They don't marry the woman, the love of their life. They marry when they are ready to get married and they find a woman they love. Then they get married. With men, it's about timing. Us women, we're so relationship oriented. We're naturally oriented toward marriage and motherhood and children that we're always ready to get married. In a certain sense, emotionally, we're always ready to get married. So for us, when we find the love of our life, great, let's get married. It's not like that with guys, So again, when you're weeding through these men, find the ones that already want to be married. And that's going to save you so much time. If a guy's not sure he wants to get married, or he thinks marriage is just a piece of paper and it's optional, blah, 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 don't even waste time with those kind of men. Seriously, don't even waste time with them. So, next one. So here's another thing too, and this goes against a little bit the spirit of what I said earlier, but you have to be, not do, to find a man. What I mean by that is, the men, this is really cliched. People say like the man's the hunter and like the woman is not, I don't know what the corollary to that is, but they say the man's the hunter, so don't chase him. And there is some truth to that. And so when, as women, we're like, I want to find like the man of my dreams, then it's like, we can tend to get very masculine, we can get into a masculine frame of mind. And we can get very, kind of aggressive about it. We're like, okay, I'm going to go to this bar. I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to look around. I'm going to see who approaches me. Like, you can tell we got a goal, and it kind of stresses us out. And that's actually putting us in that masculine frame of mind, and it's reducing that contrast. Again, we want to keep a contrast in place. And so as a woman, it's better to be feminine and then be visible than to go out and try to actively find him. You have to just put yourself in the best possible situation. So be feminine, have a certain gentleness, a certain softness. Work on your appearance. Men are very into looks. One of the prime things they want is a woman who they like looking at. And again, we women tend to be very perfectionistic about beauty. Men are not as picky as we are. So if you're like, oh, I'm not beautiful, I'm not a model, that's okay. You don't have to be a model. Just smile, be cheerful, be happy. Men find that very beautiful. And so, yeah, just be feminine and then be visible. So put yourself in a situation where you're likely to meet men. And this is where some of the traditional advice about this, where to meet men, can come in handy. Go to these places, but again, stay in a feminine mindset. You're just going there to be visible. You're just putting yourself in their path, and then if it's up, if this guy likes you, he'll come and make that known. But again, if online dating is always a good one. Friend groups is another one. It's always best to date somebody who is a mutual friend, who's kind of known, because then you kind of know his reputation. That's one of the risks about online dating. Like, you don't know his family, you don't know his reputation, like, you don't know his history, so that can be hard. You can try work. That is very risky. And also, because most of us women have to be in such a masculine frame of mind at work, it can be hard to shift out of that, not just for us, like personally, like getting back into a feminine mindset, but it can be hard for the man to see us as a feminine woman. Like, men get their mind made up, they see you at work and they see you being very like masculine, and you can often attract the more like kind of feminine men, like the softer, I don't want to say effeminate, but kind of, because they see you in your masculine role and it creates that polarity. And then you attract someone who's more on the feminine side, which is usually not what you want. If you're watching this, I'm guessing you're probably more on the traditional feminine side. And so you want a guy who's like very masculine, So yeah, that's one of the risks about, getting with people at work. Now, if you have a very feminine job, like you're in nursing or something, but even nursing, nurses are so overworked nowadays that they put you in a very masculine frame of mind because they work, the nurses so hard. But again, work can be a little risky. Maybe find conservative places, regardless of your politics. A lot of men who are more like traditionally masculine, they tend to be on like the conservative side of things. So maybe look in like patriot groups or like gun rights groups, things like that. You can find guys there. But again, it's one of those things. The last and final step is, I think it's, don't get discouraged. While you're out here, you're going to these places, you can find guys at church. That's always a good one. But don't get discouraged. That's the last step of this that I wanted to mention. It can be very discouraging because this is a process, You're going to be feminine, you're going to put yourself in a spot where, you're going to run into men. You want to put yourself in a situation where, maybe you need their help somehow, because that always brings out the best in men. And when I say the best, that brings out the side of them that's the most attractive. Part of the reason we're not, it can be hard to find a man you like is because maybe you're not seeing the best side of the men you're around. And what I mean is, I'll use the example of like Superman and Clark Kent. So Lois Lane was Superman's girlfriend, and as the story goes, she actually worked with Superman when he was Clark Kent. And so, but she never liked him as Clark Kent. She was like, oh, he's just my boring coworker, Well, that's because she was only seeing one side of him. But then when she saw his heroic side, when she'd need his help and he had to like save her when she was like doing a story and she got into trouble, she got to see that more masculine side of him, and then it created that polarity, that contrast, and then she was attracted to him. Well, she didn't need him to save her at work, and so Clark Kent was never that attractive. And so that's why I'm saying, when you're feminine and you want to be in a place where men are, you also want to, be in situations where, maybe you need a guy's help somehow. That can also bring out a side of men that is very attractive, and men like that. I think that's one of the biggest problems with feminism. It's convinced women that we're a burden and we're annoying when we like need men's help. It's not. Most men find it very enjoyable to help a woman, as long as you're appreciative and you sincerely need the help. If you're just doing it as a gimmick, then, that's not cool. I think sometimes, like my aunt once told me, I was talking about going to Harvard. She's like, drop your purse outside the men's bathroom and see who picks it up. And I was like, that's kind of gimmicky. So, things like that are gimmicky are kind of like weird. But, if you have a broken down car on the side of the road, you know, maybe stand outside your car and see if some guy pulls over and helps you. You know, if you don't have AAA and you're genuinely in a bad situation, see what happens. Guys love to help. You know, if it's a real, true situation and you really do need their help, there's no shame in asking, you know, and that can bring out that side of a man that is very masculine and very attractive. So that's also another factor to consider. But again, I'm kind of rambling off a little bit. But the final thing is, don't get discouraged. This is a process. Like I said earlier, God wants you to get married. This whole business, I know there is discussion, especially among Catholics, about whether like there's a calling to the single state. This is controversial, and you know, if your parish priest has told you different, then obviously like we'll go with what the parish priest said. Fine, I respect that. But in my humble opinion, I think the calling to the single life is a cop-out. I don't think there's a calling to the single life. That is something that has happened in the last, you know, few decades. Throughout all of the church's history, that was not seen as a thing, you know? So if you sit here and you're like, well, maybe I should just give up and assume that I'm called to the single life, I don't think there's a calling to the single life. 80% of people are called to either the community of the family or the community of a religious life. So if you are still single, hang in there. You know, God sees you. He understands that. And I had a friend who said something, and I thought it was very wise. Like she was married, and we were on this subject, you know, basically it was like, why is it taking so long for Mr. Right to show up, kind of thing. And this was a few years ago when I was talking to her about this, and she said something I'll never forget. Basically, she said, God will allow you to be single until it threatens your salvation. So what she was meaning was, God is going to leave you single until it becomes a threat to your salvation. And what that means is, I don't mean that you need to like start getting yourself into trouble, if you know what I mean, in multiple ways, to try and force God's hand. That's not what I'm saying, you know, because God will not be mocked. You can't manipulate him. He's going to do what he does regardless of what you think. But God knows, you know, what you need in order to get to heaven. You know, that's the whole reason we're here on earth, is to find our way back to God. And so he is going to set up your life so that you have the optimal chance to, you know, go to heaven. And if being single, if you're meant to be married, which most of us are, okay, so like don't overthink it. If you're not feeling called to be a nun, you're probably meant to be married, so don't stress about it. But since, you know, I'm going to assume for the sake of this video that you're meant to be married. And so since you're meant to be married, that means there's a man out there that you need to meet up with and marry in order for your life to not only go well, but in order for you to go to heaven. Now, this is a debate, you know, can you miss your vocation? Yes, you can, and still go to heaven? Yes, you can. But the point she was making was, God knows when being single is going to, you know, hurt you. And so he'll bring somebody into your life at that point. And so it was just comforting, because it kind of reminded me like, hey, God's in control here. He is watching for the exact moment to bring that person into your life. So, you know, it's just something that I always found comforting. I don't know, because I thought it was a very wise answer to this question of like, why am I still single? So anyways, I don't know if I've actually answered the question in the spirit in which it was asked. So Jacinta, I hope this is helpful. But anyways, those are my thoughts, and thanks for the question. And yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and I will see you guys later.